The Collar is a poem by Welsh poet George Herbert published in 1633, and is a part of a collection of poems within Herbert's book The Temple. The poem depicts a man who is experiencing a loss of faith and feelings of anger over the commitment he has made to God. He feels that his efforts in committing himself to his faith have been fruitless, and begins to manifest a life for himself without religious parameters. He denounces his commitments and proclaims himself free. The poem's themes include the struggle with one's beliefs and the desire for autonomy in defiance of religious restriction. The speaker is trying to create his own limits, to lead himself, rather than following God. He tries to convince himself that a life of freedom will bring him the satisfaction that his faith has failed to provide. Modern version. The Collar. I struck the board, and cried, no more. I will abroad. What, shall I ever sigh and pine? My lines in life are free, free as the road. Loose as the wind, as large as store. Shall I be still in suit? Have I no harvest but a thorn? To let me blood, and not restore what I have lost with cordial fruit? Sure there was wine. Before my sighs did dry it, there was corn. Before my tears did drown it. Is the year only lost to me? Have I no bays to crown it? No flowers, no garlands gay, all blasted, all wasted. Not so, my heart, but there is fruit. And thou hast hands. Recover all thy sigh-blown age. On double pleasures, leave thy cold dispute of what is fit and not. Forsake thy cage, thy rope of sands, which petty thoughts have made, and made to thee good cable, to enforce and draw, and be thy law, while thou didst wink and wouldst not see. Away, take heed. I will abroad. Call in thy death's head there, tie up thy fears. He that forbears to suit and serve his need deserves his load. But as I raved and grew more fierce and wild at every word, methought I heard one calling, child. And I replied, my lord. The Collar portrays a man who is relaying a previous struggle he has had with his faith. The poem begins with the speaker striking a board, most likely a pulpit or altar. The physical outburst is then followed quickly by a verbal one, as the speaker declares that he will abroad, or leave his current place. The speaker questions his religious commitment, which has not brought him the fulfillment he seeks. He thinks he can lead a life which will yield double the pleasures he sought while living as a Christian. The speaker then announces that his life will be as free as the road, and as loose as the wind, meaning that he plans to live boundlessly, without restriction. The speaker admits that there were things which he did treasure, but his sadness and lack of appreciation ruined each one. The speaker also asks if there is anything of beauty left, wonders if he is alone in this loss, and laments that he has nothing to show for the life he has lived for God. The speaker then decides to abandon this state of pining and misery, to no longer worry about living a pious life. He chooses instead to live only for himself. Instead of occupying his cage, that he has seemingly made of his own doing, he claims his cage was built upon petty thoughts, meaning that God himself did not place the speaker in the cage, but rather the speaker placed himself there by believing in a false spirituality. The speaker again tells himself to abroad, to leave this life behind. He assures himself that he will make preparations by tying up his fears so that they do not hang over him any longer. He claims that anyone who would serve to God the way he chose deserves the load he bears as a result. The speaker suddenly begins to rave, flying into a mad state of anger. The speaker suddenly hears a voice call, child, and the man immediately calms himself, replies to the voice with the simple acknowledgement, my lord. The speaker has recognized God's presence, feels chided and immediately submissive to a greater one than himself alone, once again. His ravings are forgotten once God shows himself to the speaker, suggesting that his commitment to his faith has not been fruitless after all, or is at least ongoing. The title of the poem, The Collar, is symbolic. It seems to represent the relationship between the man within the poem and God. Collar, in this poem may refer to a clerical collar, which priests wear as a religious symbol. To take off the collar is to revoke one's dedication to ministry. The title may also refer to the term, to slip the collar, or to slip out and avoid the restraints of the church. Herbert portrays the collar as a form of restraint for priests and as a play on words, conveying that the collar can be seen as one for a slave to it, or rather to Christianity. A collar, after all, is a restrictive garment, often a symbol of ownership. Paul M. Levitt and Kenneth G. Johnston introduced the idea that the use of the word collar by Herbert can be seen in a nautical sense, as the rope that supports and maintains the main mast of a ship, preventing it from moving from its position. Levitt and Johnston compare the poem's speaker to the mast of a ship, and the collar of the ship to a clerical collar, each are being held in place by restraints. There is also the possibility that the poem uses the title sonically, because collar sounds like the words collar and kohler. Dale B. J. Randall points out that this poem is a story of a choleric man who has a burst of strong emotion, connecting the illness to the line, but as I raved and grew more fierce and wild. Randall also points out that the pun pertaining to collar is the idea that the caller is God, who is calling on the speaker in the line, "Methought I heard one calling child," at the end of the poem. Barbara Leah Harmon points out that the beginning of the poem starts at the end of a man's journey and the beginning of a new one. The speaker isn't a present tense speaker, but a duplicator of present tense speech. Harmon explains the speaker has reaped what he has sown, and the poem signifies the use of the word harvest as metaphorical, meaning the fruit of his labor has not been bountiful. I struck the board, and cried, no more. I will abroad. What? Shall I ever sigh and pine? My lines in life are free, free as the road. Loose as the wind, as large as store. Shall I be still in suit? In the first 6 lines, the reader is clued into the conflict, a man struggling with his faith. The speaker has decided to abroad, or to abandon his current life. In another poem by Herbert, Content, the speaker warns himself to avoid abroading, and listening to his muttering thoughts. Herbert's poetry often follows this theme, man's relationship to his faith. The speaker declares, my lines in life are free, free as the road, loose as the wind, lines 3 to 4, meaning that his restraints aren't physical but spiritual, and he is considering why he should remain in God's service. He is declaring that there is a whole world beyond the life he's currently living and much to experience. The man is yearning earthly desires and has been blinded by the fact that God has not provided the riches he feels he deserves. The words, no more, in line 1 introduce the man's feelings, as if he has experienced too much turmoil, but now feels angry enough to leave his present life. He declares, I will abroad. Levitt and Johnston make the claim that the board the speaker strikes in line 1 is meant to represent the deck of a ship. However, Dale B. J. Randall points out that the use of the word could be multi-layered, the most sensible option being a communion table. Daniel Ruby backs this idea, pointing out that the board may indeed be correlated to a communion table, keeping with the religious theme of the poem. Have I no harvest but a thorn? To let me blood, and not restore what I have lost with cordial fruit. Sure there was wine. Before my sighs did dry it, there was corn. Before my tears did drown it. Is the year only lost to me? Have I no bays to crown it? No flowers, no garlands gay, all blasted, all wasted. In lines 7 through 15, the speaker explains that his harvest, his work, hasn't produced the kind of abundance he desires. The line, have I no harvest but a thorn, relates to the Bible verse Jeremiah 12:13, they will sow wheat but reap thorns, they will wear themselves out but gain nothing. They will bear the shame of their harvest. The speaker questions why he hasn't received this, which he feels he has earned through his dedication to God. He admits reluctantly that, sure there was wine, there was corn. Lines 10 to 11, but these payments are washed away by his inability to be grateful for such things. Wine and corn may symbolize bread and wine used in communion, which calls back to the image of the speaker slamming his hand down on a communion table. In line 13, the speaker wonders, the year only lost to me, showing that he questions whether he is the only one not receiving God's favor. By this point the speaker has become so concerned with his desire for freedom that he gets lost in the idea of being a slave to God. He forgets that while following God means to bear a burden, it is not one which is difficult or impossible. This alludes to the Bible verse Matthew 11:30, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Not so, my heart, but there is fruit. And thou hast hands. Recover all thy sigh-blown age. On double pleasures, leave thy cold dispute. Of what is fit and not. Forsake thy cage, thy rope of sands, which petty thoughts have made, and made to thee. Good cable, to enforce and draw, and be thy law. While thou didst wink and wouldst not see. Away, take heed. I will abroad. In lines 16 through 27, the speaker discusses other ways to enjoy life's pleasures and how he cannot give them on his own. He appears to be convincing himself that there are better ways of living than the life he has chosen for himself. The speaker no longer seems concerned with being sinful or sinless. He decides to end his avoidance of double pleasures, which he couldn't partake in because of his faith. He seems less concerned with what is right or wrong and determined to forsake the ties that bind him to a life of religious servitude. The line, while thou didst wink and wouldst not see, may connect to the Bible verse, who winks with their eye is plotting perversity, whoever purses their lips is bent on evil. Proverbs 16:30. The speaker may be insinuating that these thoughts have been building over time, and his plot to desert his religion has been growing in his mind until now, the breaking point. Call in thy death's head there, tie up thy fears. He that forbears to suit and serve his need deserves his load. But as I raved and grew more fierce and wild at every word, methought I heard one calling, Child. And I replied, My Lord. In this section, the speaker refers to a memento mori, a figure which exists as a reminder of the fact that death comes for all in the end. The speaker is aware that he is not immortal, and this realization inspires him to seek fulfillment while he is physically present on earth. He decides to tie up his fears, or rein them in, so they can no longer hang over him and threaten his happiness. He then declares that those who would sacrifice their personal desires and ambitions to commit to a life of servitude, deserve the load they bear. This judgment seems to be a criticism upon himself for not abandoning his religion sooner. As his ravings increase in intensity, his dedication to this new decision more solidified, it seems. The speaker will never calm himself. Then he hears the voice of God calling to him, Child. In the end, the man regains his faith in the Lord because he realizes he is not shouting into an abyss. God hears him, and that is all the speaker needs to know to re-enter his life of servitude. The speaker replies to God with, My Lord, the possessive language signifying his spiritual dedication. Michael Martin explains that the speaker didn't hear from God because of his decision to stray away from him, or because he spoke against him, but because of God's grace. His desire to comfort the speaker is what motivated the gentle admonishment. 7th Martin explains that this immediate forgiveness of the speaker's outcry against God is meant to show his boundless grace. Martin also points out that Herbert purposefully rhymes word with Lord, in order to show that the speaker finds immediate comfort in receiving nothing but a single word from God. R.L. Colley discusses the idea of muteness with grace, or becoming silent after seeing or hearing from God. Colley also explains the speaker has no difficulty in defying God, speaking against him and discarding the sanctity of communion, but with one word from God, the speaker is placated.